In today's video, we take on Gran Turismo 7's hardest ever race in sport mode. This was an absolute test of endurance and concentration in very, very difficult conditions. So let's see how we got on. Now, if you do enjoy this video, consider giving it a like, subscribe to the channel, and hopefully we can help you out in the future with more and more content on Gran Turismo 7. So starting off this race, we had to use the replay footage because it was that long. I had to do it from the replay file and record it directly from that. So you won't have the deltas on the left, but everything else is the same as the race that we did, including the view. So we're starting the race from P7. We didn't get the best qualifying lap in this combination, but we're going to see what we can do in this combination from P7, working our way forward. So start of the race, first things first, was just trying to keep it as smooth as we could in these wet conditions. Now, this was a 30 lap race, you can see there at Spa, so it was going to be a very, very long endurance battle this, and it started off on the intermediate conditions. Now, the intermediate conditions since the update really do seem to be the tyre to go on in the wet conditions. It seems like the track takes a little bit longer to get to the heavy wet conditions. So at the moment, the way things are, intermediates are back being a very, very strong tyre in these conditions. Now, straight away you can see there we were getting a little bit of a bump draft from the Lexus behind us. I think most people didn't want to battle too hard at the opening part of the race, and by the time we get to the end of lap 1 here, we can see as we come to the penalty zone, a few people obviously taking penalties, and we managed to get ourselves straight away up to P5. But what that's caused there is a little bit of chaos which we're involved with, and also a bit of a gap now to the top 4. The top 4 have managed to get away, but you can see on the inside here, the Porsche goes for a little bit of a send up the inside there. We managed to keep the car on the left hand side and still managed to hold on to that P5. So all that tended to do was just cause us all a bit of loss of time there, I think. But the battle's going to continue on this lap 2, and then as we come to the braking zone, you can see that John is going to go for a move up the inside there. He actually pulls off quite a nice overtake on the inside there and puts himself up into P5 and drops myself down into P6. So now we're in the slipstream to the Nissan GTR. It's just a case of can we hang on to that Nissan GTR at the moment, because he's a very, very quick driver. He seems to have really picked up the pace recently now that he's back on the game, doing the races obviously for the preparing probably for the official season. So the Lexus behind this is also going to work smart here at the start, and this is kind of what you want to happen at the start of a race like this. You kind of want to race smart, so I didn't really want to even attempt an overtake on the Nissan GTR there. At this stage, we just want to try and get in a rhythm, because the top 4 have started to pull away already. They've already built up a gap, and we need to just try and play this as smart as we can, because this is going to be an extremely long race. Now, by the time we get to lap 4 here, you can see we've now got Mika Hazal behind us, and John is getting a little bit further away there in that Nissan GTR. He seems to have a really good pace. You can see he's managed to catch up to that group, and he's really motoring on up there. He seems like he's got really the hang of that Nissan in these conditions, and that is one thing that I think has changed slightly, is since they've altered the weather, it does seem like there's a lot more cars that seem competitive in the wet conditions, which is a very good thing, I think, personally. But you can see there Mikhail Zhao right behind us, picking up that slipstream. We managed to get through the Arouge pretty cleanly, and he's going to have the slipstream going into the braking zone, but will he be able to go for a move? You can see he's picking up the slip. He's going to go to the right hand side to have a little look for a move, but obviously I'm on the drier part of the track here, so I managed to brake a little bit later and hold on to that P6 at this stage. So just about managing to stay ahead of Hizal there, and now we're going to try and stay as close to them cars in front. We're still getting a little bit of slipstream from that Nissan GTR. However, as we come into the braking phase, you can see here, trying to hold that tight lane. You can actually see the dry line visibly. So you're not really having to use the wet line so much. However, as I come into this left-hand corner, we go a little bit wide there, get off the optimal line, and then obviously on the curb on the throttle, we're going to lose momentum out of there, and Hizal goes for the move up the inside, and he's going to take that position and put himself up to P6. Now, he runs a little bit deep, so I see an opportunity to go back down the inside, but again, it's very difficult to try and run side by side here, but we do manage to go almost briefly side by side, but Hizal manages to keep the position. Now, the Lexus is going to have a little look up the inside there. We're going to try and hold the inside for the next part of the corner. However, he's got the momentum on the outside there, and we've dropped ourselves down to P8. So not a very good lap this one so far. We've managed to put ourselves all the way down into P8 here, and now we're going to just try and hang back in. Now we've got the Audi behind us, who seems to be in every race that we do at the moment, whether it's Interlagos, Suzuka. Always that Audi that we seem to be very close with and having good battles with at the moment. So as we're on the straight here, we make a little bit of a mistake there. Almost crashed, and we actually end up getting a bit of a bump draft from the Audi, so that kind of helped me out. Now, the Audi is going to have a little look at going for a move on the right-hand side there. You can see he's going to go for the inside line, and he's going to try and brake as late as he can into that braking zone, and he actually pulls off a really nice overtake there to put himself up into P8 and knock myself down into P9. And now we've got a Ferrari behind us, which we all know in these wet conditions a Ferrari is very quick. Although what I will say again is I think since they've changed the physics, it does seem a little bit more equal amongst different cars. Now we're going to skip a little bit further on now till lap 8, and you can see we've managed to stay with that Audi in front of us in the slipstream, and at this stage we're not doing too bad. Obviously we're starting to pick up the pace a little bit, and now the track's drying out. It seems to be coming back to me a little bit in this part of the race, but you can see there is still a massive gap. If you look at the track map, the leaders are well and truly gone pretty much at this stage, but we're going to try and hang with this race. We're down in P9. Not the best first stint, to be brutally honest. I was a little bit disappointed with how this first stint has gone. As you can see there, he's just trying to pick up a bit of water on the tyres to cool them down, just so they don't wear so much as this track is drying out. Now again, working our way through this second sector, the middle sector of Spa, just trying to keep the flow going here as we come into that right hand corner, just trying to use the curb, and you can see there getting right up onto the curb. You can get away with that with the intermediate tyres, you don't really need to worry, but you can see just how close the field spread is here now as we look at the replay camera. You can see the battles are really, really close, and there's a lot of cars very, very close together as we work our way through that middle sector. And you can see we're actually starting to catch back up to some of the cars that we obviously dropped off from on that first few laps. We're starting to pick up the pace, and you can see we're right behind the Audi now, putting him under some pressure here. This part of the race seems to be quite strong for myself in terms of the track drying out, and the Porsche in general felt pretty good in this phase where it was going from inters verging on getting onto the dry tyre. Now you can see that the track is obviously starting to dry out, and some people are going to take a risk in this race. You can see here there is a dry line. It's a noticeable dry line. For me personally, lap 8, the end of lap 8 was a little bit too early to go for that pit stop. I wouldn't have felt confident. You can see the edge of the tracks, the curbs, they've still got a lot of water on them, and one little mistake in these conditions and you know you're on dry tyres, you're going to be spinning off. As the Ferrari has a little look around the outside there, as we made a little bit of a mistake, but we've now got the inside and we've managed to hold on to that position. You see, giving him the space on the exit, and then we've got a little bit more exit speed from that corner as we go into the braking zone for the chicane, and we've managed to just about hang on here. You can see he's still holding it on the outside, but now we're going to work our way onto the start straight, and you can see there John has gone for a pit stop early from the intermediate tyres. He's going to take them intermediate tyres off and put on a fresh set of hards. Now, as we come to the end of lap 9, this is the time for myself to get them hard tyres on. I felt like confident enough. You can see a lot of people still staying out. There was quite a few drivers that weren't risking it on lap 9. They were actually going to go to the end of lap 10. But I felt confident enough that we could make this work. And you see there, we've got a little bit of a gap to the Audi, where we lost a bit of time at the end of that stint there fighting with the Ferrari. And now we've got to try and catch back up to that group. So by the time we get to the start of lap 11, the end of lap 10, you can see there more drivers are going in the pits. Now the Ferrari decided to stay out very, very long in this race. You can see here as we're starting lap 11, we've managed to get a nice jump over a lot of drivers that have stayed out. And yeah, that hasn't really worked for some of them. And I think there is still 1 or 2 drivers that are in front of us that haven't yet pitted even at this stage. So they're definitely going to lose out a little bit with the track drying out as much as it is. It is definitely better to be on the hard tyres at this stage of the race. And you can see there a little bit of a mistake from the Porsche. That's going to give us the ability to get past him there. I think he got a little bit of water on the tyres, went a bit wide, had to lift off the throttle or he would have been spinning. And now we're up into P10 again. And you can see there we're right behind the leader now in the McLaren. He started the race in P1. He qualified on pole, and yeah, he's not having the best race, to be honest with you, by the looks of it. He's struggling a little bit at the moment, and we're right up behind him. There's obviously been some sort of incident. He's gone on, probably with the hard tyre, gone onto the wet spot, and yeah, gone flying off, as you're about to witness now. As we go to the replay camera, you keep your eye on the distance there with the Porsche that was behind me. It gets a little bit of water on the tyres, and that is what can happen so easily with these conditions. And that's why a lot of people don't take the risk of pitting too early. They tend to want to just eke it out as much as possible on the intermediates to play it as safe as possible. But you can see there, by the time we're starting lap 12, we've got 2 more drivers into the pits that still haven't pitted, and one of them was the Ferrari that was behind me. And you can see it hasn't really worked out for him. As we go past the pit lane entrance there, you'll see him in the mirror just exiting the pit lane, and he's definitely lost out on a couple of seconds there, and he's probably cost himself the slipstream and possibly the ability to stay in this battle. So we're in the slipstream to the McLaren at this stage, and that's quite handy because the McLaren driver was very quick here. It just looks like he was making a few little mistakes that were causing him problems every now and then again, by the time we get to the end of lap 12, you can see the McLaren has managed to pull out a little bit there, and we've got a yellow flag, and that is John, who pitted really early, and that is a price you can pay for just getting slightly off the track. And I think it was more of a racing incident when I checked that out on the replay camera, but yeah, it was a little bit of a 50-50 situation, but it's so easy to just get your tyre onto that water and you are flying off the track. And yeah, unfortunately for John, him and Lewis came very, very close together, and John came off worse and ended up losing a lot of positions with damage as well. Now, by the time we get to lap 15 here, you can see we're starting to get a bit of a rhythm going. We're improving the lap times. We're into the mid 18s here, and we've managed to catch up that Audi, which was I was really happy about. I've managed to really push, and we're starting to find some pace here, and everything was going quite well at this stage. And then by the time we get to lap 18, you can see that our lap times have got a lot better and very consistent as well. But you can also see that the clouds have started to build again, and this is what made this race absolutely amazing. You know, from wet to dry to wet, and you can see the consistency there with 4 laps in a row, pretty much. Well, 3 laps in a row, all on 18.0s. I was driving really well at this stage, and we were putting ourselves back in a chance of picking up some reasonable points. But now we know we're going to have that rain coming in a bit. And again, this is a tricky stage of the race because it's all about figuring out when you can pit. You know, you've already been driving for 43 minutes at this stage. It is quite a draining race in terms of concentration, trying to keep that 100% concentration after going from wet to dry, and now we're going to go back into a wet phase. However, because of the scripted weather, we kind of know roughly about when we're going to be pitting, because unfortunately Gran Turismo don't run the fully dynamic weather very often. But yeah, this is certainly looking like a very interesting battle that's going to be progressing here. You've got the McLaren there, and we've got the Audi in front of us, and we've got myself in P7, and you can see by the time we get to lap 20, you can start seeing moisture now on the track. You can see it on the telemetry. The water is building up, and this is going to start getting tricky. Now, some people were going to go in the pits on the end of lap 20. You can see that one driver has actually pitted at lap 19, the end of lap 19, and that is a huge mistake. That is definitely not the way to do this. Unfortunately for him, he probably didn't see any of the other lobbies that ran earlier in the day and didn't know that lap 19 was not the lap to pit on. So you can see here, we're staying out on lap 20, and we're picking up the slipstream to the Audi, and we're possibly going to be able to go for a move into the braking zone. So we're going to have a little look up the inside. Are we going to be able to send this? He's still got the slipstream, and he's going to brake as late as he can, and he actually manages to hold that really nicely around the outside. Now, obviously, we couldn't just take the normal line through there, so we had to give him the space. And then as we come through this right-hand corner, we can see the Lexus right in front of us there. Nearly caught me out. I actually panicked when that happened, because I just saw it last minute, and yeah, we just about managed to avoid that Lexus who had been off the track there, and that's one more position we gained. So we're up to P6. We've got the McLaren and Audi right in front of us. So at the moment, we've managed to recover after the first third of the race. It really wasn't going very well. It was a bit of a disaster. We had gone all the way down to P9, and it really was not looking like a good race for us. But now, at this stage, it's looking better as the Audi is going to go off into the pits. And this is where I was saying about it was too early on lap 19, because I decided to stay out for one more lap and do 21 laps before I go into the pits. And now, a lot of people would not have risked this. It's also depended on how fast your race was, because if your race wasn't as fast paced and you tried to do 21 laps, you would end up in a very bad situation. But I felt like, even though we had a lot of issues at the start, the actual pace on the dry stint then was pretty solid, and we should be able to get close to making this. So you can see by the time we get towards the end of the lap here, you can see that moisture, it's verging on the line of the intermediate. It's so close to getting really wet here, and there was a real heavy band of rain just about to hit the track on the last sector. So I knew I had to drive this really well on this in lap. Everything had to be perfect. You can visually see it on the screen. The rain is coming down. This is going to be very sketchy as we come to these last few corners. And again, I made sure I gave it a lift as we came through this fast left-hand corner. You're going to see the throttle. I lift off the throttle just to make sure that we're not going to understeer wide, and we make sure we stay on the track there. And then again, into the chicane, you can see onto the brakes as early as we can, because I can see that this track is getting very, very tricky. And you can see we're going to shoot off into the pit lane and get them intermediate tyres on again. So now some people were going full wets, and I'll tell you now, it was a mistake, because the intermediate tyres held up really well in these heavy rain conditions. And with the way, like I said before, they've changed the way the weather works, and it does seem like the track tends to stay a little bit dry. It's like they've altered the dry line, and you can see here the driver that actually pitted the lap early than us, that was about, I think it was like 7/10 in front of us, we've actually gained by doing that one extra lap on the dry tyre. Only about 3-4 tenths, but it was clearly the right thing to do because we're fully back in that slipstream to that Audi, and this is looking like an absolute battle. But yeah, as we were saying, the dry line now in the wet is a little bit more drivable, and the wet line's a bit wider, so you've got more options in terms of when it's really wet where you can drive. But when it's actually an intermediate stage, the track seems to be dry enough to just continue using the almost dry line with a few little variations in there just to make sure you're not completely on it. So yeah, it definitely seems more, for me it feels better with this new model for the rain. It feels more drivable. It feels like the racing's going to be closer with less, you know, maybe a few less mistakes than you'd normally see in this heavy rain. But you can see here how wet it's getting now. We're on lap 24 and you can see the spray kicking up. The intermediate tyres, you can see the bar is virgin on the full wet bar there, and it is going to get trickier as this race goes on because it's going to get heavier and heavier. But them intermediate tyres were really working in these conditions, and you can see here as we're in that slipstream to the Audi, working our way onto the straight now. We're just trying to stay with him and just look for opportunities if we can to see if we can get an overtake done somewhere and try and get a move done. However, as we're going through a Rouge, we pick up a lovely ½ a second penalty there, which is going to be a massive problem because, you know, you're going to lose positions. But luckily for me, in the wet, it wasn't as bad as what I was expecting. So ½ a second penalty, you're not going to lose too much in the wet because when it breaks, it just kind of locks up a bit and doesn't actually slow you down as much. So we actually lose one position but stay in the slipstream to the Lexus. So kind of very grateful there that the wet conditions, obviously we got the penalty in the wet part of the race, because now we're still in that slipstream. And I know that this Lexus is very temperamental on the throttle out of this chicane, because I'd seen him behind me earlier on in the race and he was struggling, and you can see straight away we managed to get much better drive with the Porsche. You can see the acceleration difference as we come out of that corner, and now we're going to go for that move up the inside and then into the braking zone. We should be able to hold this inside line and take that position back, which we do manage to do, and now we're going to be back behind that Audi for the main straight. So that didn't work out too bad in the end there. You can see we're still in P6, and then as we go a little bit further on in the race here, you can now see that we're in P6 still. We've got that Lexus behind us still, and we've got that McLaren right in front, but the Audi is actually going to go for a move on the McLaren here, and he's going to manage to get past him there, as I think the McLaren got a slightly poor exit from the corner. We're not going to be able to go for the overtake here. You can see I had to hang back and just wait for an opportunity, and then as we come into the braking zone for the final corner, this is sometimes an overtaking opportunity, and we actually pull off an absolutely lovely overtake here, going round the outside, manage to brake late enough, and then we give ourselves the inside line, and then we get on the throttle slightly off the dry line, which gives us really good traction. And yeah, we managed to get that move done lovely to put myself up into P5 and right up behind the Audi. So from P9 to P5 on the last 2/3 of the race, this is looking like a really nice recovery, because I was a little bit worried at the start of the race. Didn't really go our way, but these conditions, you really do have to just keep concentrating, because anything can happen. And you can see straight away we started to get a bit of a gap to the McLaren behind us and the Lexus in these conditions. I don't know if them cars were struggling a little bit as it started to get a little bit heavier on the rain, or whether they were just still using too much of the dry liners. We were using slight variations. We were, you know, basically using the dry line, but there was variations where I was just trying to pick up a bit of the wet line every now and then just to try and get a bit more grip on the exits. And you can see by the time we get to lap 28, we're still right behind the Audi, and we've actually managed to break away from the McLaren and the Lexus that was behind us. So looking like more of a battle now for P4 with this Audi. It was all about just trying to find the grip in these conditions. It was getting very heavy. I think if it had got a little bit more heavy, the rain, and a bit more persistent on the heavy rain, it would have been virgin on the full wets. But the way it is at the moment, you can see that we're still not on that full wet bar, and the inters are holding up really well in these conditions. Technically, it probably should have been full wet tyres at this point, I think, but yeah, you can see the inters are still working very well, and they are giving us the grip at this stage of the race. You can see they're picking up the slipstream, getting close in certain areas of the track, but then losing in other areas to the Audi. It seemed like there was places where the Audi was either very good, or the driver was good in them sectors, or I was better in some sectors, or it could have been the Porsches advantages. Like I say, it seemed to be like slight car variations, because some points the Audi would pull away, but then towards the end of the middle sector I seemed to be able to bring it back and get a little bit closer to him, and in some of the mid-speed corners the Porsche felt really good compared to the Audi. So yeah, it was really interesting, the dynamic between the Audi versus the Porsche in this battle. You can see in the bottom right hand corner staying really, really close, and you can see just how wet this race was at this stage, and this was a true test of concentration. Remember, we're not using traction control in these conditions. We've got traction control off because the traction control will actually slow you down as you're trying to ease that throttle out of the corners, especially with the new model for the weather. I used to use TC for safety, but I felt much more comfortable with how it is now that we were able to not use it at all during this race and just do it by throttle feel. So you can see, powering our way through on the replay camera, you can see just how close this is. You can see the McLaren in the distance is lurking there in the distance, but it's just a little bit too far behind for us to really worry about as we come into the end of this race. And you can see we're just trying to find as much grip as we can. It was really difficult this stage of the race. This was the hardest stage, I felt. It was just about basically survival. The rain was heavy, we're on intermediate tyres, we've been racing for over an hour, and you just don't want to make a mistake. One lapse of concentration in these conditions and your whole race could be over with heavy damage on. So it really was a fine margin between pushing to pushing too hard, and at this stage I was pretty happy with the pace. We were doing well, we're maintaining the gap to the cars behind. You can see the laps have gone a little bit slower as this heavy rain's kicking in, and you can see it's actually briefly going over the intermediate line now onto the full wet tyres. But at this stage we've only got a lap left, and you can see by the time we get to the end of lap 30 we started to get close to the Audi. Every now and then we'd lose a bit of a little mistake, and then we'd just try and get it back to him. But at this stage it looks like he's managed to hold that gap and keep enough of a gap that I will not be able to challenge. And you can see onto this final really important corner before you go into this power section, he's got enough of a gap before he's going to go into the braking zone. You can see as we go through this left hand corner, the weather was really bad. I have to say, on this last lap it probably was verging on the full wet conditions now, but for one lap it wouldn't have been worth it. So we did the right strategy. Staying on the inters was the way to go. And you can see as we come into the braking zone, we're going to brake as late as we can, because you never know, you can make a mistake. And then as we come into the braking zone, you can see he gets a little bit loose on the braking and almost loses the rear, manages to save it, and yeah, just giving us a little glimpse that we might have had an opportunity, but still we go over the line for a very, very solid P5 and a thoroughly enjoyable race. Definitely one of the most fun races I've had on this game in a very, very long time, and I would love to see more races like this in Gran Turismo. And we come away with 341 points from that, which I was very, very happy about. So yeah, if you did enjoy that, smash the like, subscribe to the channel if you want to, and hopefully we'll be able to give you more races like that in the future. Thanks again for watching, everyone.